the Americans really understood the situation. So they had Japan's code cracked from, I think, the beginning of the war. And basically they, in a debrief to Truman, they said, quote, until the Japanese leaders realize that an invasion cannot be repelled, there's little likelihood that they will accept any peace terms satisfactory to the Allies. So we're at the point here where they're not going to give up with the terms we want. So we got to think, what are those next steps? And that's where the atomic bombs come into play. So on August 6th, they dropped the uranium bomb on Hiroshima. 16 hours later, Truman asked for surrender again. They're still waiting. They don't hear anything from the Japanese. And then on August 9th, something even crazier maybe to the Japanese happens is the Soviets invade. And now that blows up everything they'd possibly thought of. What are we going to do now? We can't use Stalin for a mediator. We've already been atomic bombed once. What's the worst that could happen? Well, how about hours later, another bomb, right? We have Nagasaki that's been hit. So it's kind of a double whammy for the Japanese. They're in disarray. They don't know what to do. The Soviets have won the battle in the north and taken the northeast part of China and most of Korea. So we go back to the council. It's after Nagasaki. So you can't use the Soviets anymore. You don't know the extent of the American nuclear program. So what is going to happen next? They are still split. They still don't know what to do. They're like, 3 of them were like, yeah, okay, we'll surrender, but the emperor still has to stay in charge. And the other 3 are like, well, what if maybe there's one last battle? Maybe if they invade, we can beat them one last time.
It's so interesting though, right? Like that is,
yeah.
Even then, we're talking 2 of the most destructive bombs ever dropped in the history of the Earth. Nothing before or after, never to have happened again. Russia has doubled back on you and attacked, and almost to their credit in a weird way, they're still like, yo, maybe maybe we have it.
Yeah, it's
it's
you
just
can tell how
crazy,
deep
man. It's crazy.
that loyalty and that like refusing to surrender is just so deep within the culture.
So deep. It's so
that
entrenched.
from the private on the front lines all the way up to the heights of the government.
Yep.
But it gets to the point where basically they agree, okay, we need to surrender. There was an American pilot who was captured who basically told the Japanese intelligence that the Americans have 100 atomic bombs loaded on planes and Japan will be wiped off the face of the earth in a matter of weeks if you don't surrender. Little did they know Americans didn't have any atomic bombs ready. They had another one coming in a few weeks, and then they were probably going to have a 4th one closer to like the end of September. So that definitely wasn't the case, but the Japanese, for all they knew, this is a new technology. All you need is one bomb to destroy a city. Like, what could possibly be next? So they respond to the Allies and they say, okay, we'll surrender, we'll agree to everything, but the emperor must be an absolute monarch. And the Allies respond quite cleverly saying, we disagree with that, and we're not going to accept those surrender terms. The Japanese people will decide who rules them. And I think that's pretty cool of like, we're putting democracy in place here, whether you like it or not. So it goes back to the council, and the council's like, well, we can't get rid of the emperor. The emperor's been in charge for generations. What are we going to do? Like, he's a god in the eyes of the Japanese people. We cannot have him step down.
I don't think that's known to a lot of people, right? Like, I don't think your average person would know that factoid of history, that especially in the Asian and Japanese context, that the emperor is literally, God. Like, he is seen as a god. He is not human. Like, he is God on earth. Like, it is his kingdom that he's kind of reigning over. It's very unique to how we kind of see our leaders, right? Like, they are very human. They are quite fallible.
Yeah. And it's interesting because you don't, even at that time, like there's, emperors from the past and kings that were deified, but to come into the 20th century with a deified god, deified leader, like it's not something you see, but yeah, like he was literally a god in their eyes and almost, would stand farther away from people and kind of revered from, people would look at him and be, oh my God, I saw the emperor. Like, this is like touching the hand of God, right? But to his credit, the emperor, he takes a kind of look around and he realizes that not only will we lose this war, but Japan may cease to exist. Our culture may be destroyed. Everything that he loves about his country will be gone. And he makes the decision, tells the council, look, I'll step down. I'll be there in a ceremonial role, which kind of happens throughout the next few years, but I will agree to not be an absolute monarch anymore. And we will transition into, some form of democracy. And so to his credit, he was the guy who kind of took control of this council. And thankfully, I guess in this sense, having an absolute monarchy saved a lot of lives, caused a lot of deaths earlier on, obviously up to that point. But to this point, like just having the emperor come in and say, you know what, no, this is done. And they have to agree. This is their God. This is their emperor speaking. And so, but what happened is right before this happened, some senior military leaders caught wind of what was going on. And there was actually an attempted coup that happened the night before the emperor was ready to speak to the people about this. So senior military leaders actually entered the palace, and they were actually looking for Prime Minister Suzuki because they believed that he was kind of pulling the strings and convincing the emperor to do this. So they actually went into his office. Thank God he wasn't there. They shot the place up, lit it on fire, and he'd left a mere minutes before because he was tipped off by somebody, which was absolutely crazy because, like, you know, this is the prime minister of your country in war, and you're having a full-on coup, like, with military leaders who will not surrender no matter what, would let Japan burn to the ground before they surrender.
It's absolutely insane. Like, it's crazy just how the level of commitment to see this all the way through and to not surrender among some of the highest ranking military officials in Japan at the time. Like, it is, I can't even begin to like wrap my head around it.
It's a different type of world, and I think, like, you have some level-headed people who are thinking about it, but like this we do not surrender mentality, this is the way, this is the samurai way.
Yeah.
We will not surrender. But what the crazier thing to me is the revolt was put down, and when I say put down, like, there was some violence, but mostly the leaders walked free after. They were like, all right guys, like, we get it, you tried, you failed. And so actually the next day they were walking the streets handing out like leaflets to people defending their actions, saying like, this is why we did it. But
No way.
by the time,
That's wild.
yeah, but by this time the emperor had already spoken, basically saying like, look, this is done, we're surrendering, talk to the people, talk to the army, basically saying like, Japan will be destroyed if we don't stop. And so again, when your deified leader speaks, the people listen.